been a while since I've got my fix with one of these in. So how this works is we're going to be generating random weapons. We'll find one that we like for the clash that we roll, and then I'm going to draw it in like Photoshop or something and give it some better stats that I think would fit it a little bit better. To decide what class we're going to be generating weapons for, let's spin the wheel of fun and see what we get. Engineer it is. I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, but we're going to be using Cultured Shrimp's generator, partially because I think it's one of the best ones currently, but also because it has class selection, so now we don't have to keep re-rolling that much. I feel like the problem I'm going to be faced with is not necessarily that we're never going to find anything, but more so that there are going to just be too many options. Like, we're going to run into so many good weapon bases that I am never going to be able to choose one that I want to work with. Oh, wow. Okay, this is interesting. This is shoes for the engineer. This guy, if you've not seen my Cultured Shrimp weapon generator video, basically this guy added, like, a bunch of really cool stuff, and, honest to God, this generator is probably one of the most interesting ones out there right now, just because, like, you get really strange weapon combinations that I think are really cool bases to work with. So this one, with this generated, and this does bother me that these aren't, like, rounded to 5s, but we'll probably have to fix that. What this generated is that it's shoes that you can equip for the engineers. I guess this is a secondary. Oh yeah, no, it is. I can't read. You get 12% faster running speed, plus 26% ammo on all weapons, plus 21 max HP, and plus 24% jump height. And then the cons are bleeds up to minus 2 HP per second after not healing or killing an enemy for 25 seconds. So basically, like, if you've not received health or killed somebody in a 25-second window, then you just start leaking health, which is kind of annoying. And then 10% slower speed for 10 seconds after jumping. So already what I'm seeing here is a mobility-based item for the engineer in sacrificing your secondary, like, pistol wrangler, whatever. I think that would actually be pretty balanced. I think not having a usable secondary weapon in exchange for getting, like, kind of a stat boost all around would be really interesting, although I think we can do a little bit more with it than just, like, flat stats. Alright, here's what I have decided to do with the engineer boot, shoes, whatever. So the main function of these, instead of just having a flat jump boost, I thought it would be interesting if you could have, like, a chargeable super jump, similar to, I think, Baptiste from Overwatch. It's been a while since I played that game, but I know there's something similar there that I think with some tweaking could work for Engineer and TF2. Essentially what you would do is you'd be able to crouch, and that would charge up the little, like, super jump meter, and then when you press jump, you would be able to activate it and go flying into the air. It's kind of similar to, I guess, if you've ever played Saxton Hale. Saxton Hale has, like, a super jump meter that you can, like, charge up, and then whenever you release, the farther you've charged it, the higher into the air you'd go. There are ways that we can make it so, like, oh, maybe whatever direction you're looking in is, like, how you end up flying as engineer, but I think keeping it simple is probably the best way to go, just so it's not overtuned. The way that we balance the super jump meter is, number one, you actually have to sit there and charge it, just so you can't, like, activate super jump to prevent you from, like, taking damage in the middle of a firefight, because that would be kind of annoying. But then number two is that it would cost, like, a little bit of metal every time you used it. So, like, maybe, like, minus 10 metal at, like, the base charge, and then minus 25 at max. And the idea is that, like, max charge would make you go absolutely skyrocketing, so ideally you would, like, never really want to charge it all the way. Like, somewhere in between would be where you would go, but then, like, you'd have to kind of practice with the weapon to do that. So, the other stats that I gave this, other than that, are basically just you never take falling damage to make it so you don't just die instantly. Plus 15 max health on wear is something that I think has precedence with the gunslinger, and I think I'll design this to be, like, robotic boots or whatever, but I think that would be, it makes sense. The only thing that I would say is that having an engineer with 165 health might be a little bit ridiculous if they're using the gunslinger, so it might be necessary to, like, say, plus 15 max health on the wear if they're not using the gunslinger. I don't know. We'd have to balance that a little bit, but I think max health generally would help, and it would provide engineer with a bit of a better offensive option for wrenches that aren't the gunslinger. And then Plus 10% move speed on wear, I think, is just a pretty flat one. I mean, if you're getting like robotic boots or whatever, it just kind of makes sense. And quite frankly, I mean, you're giving up the pistol, which has like medium range damage, which is pretty good. You're giving up the short circuit, which has projectile removing capabilities, and you're giving up the Wrangler, especially as the huge one. So I think giving this a little bit more than just like a mobility option, having some flat stat boost would make it a little bit more usable under typical settings. All right, we've upgraded to Photoshop this time around. Not that I've not had this on my computer ever since the first video, it's just that I've never really cared to use it. I did freaking MS Paint on the first one for a meme, and now the meme is dead, so we will no longer be doing that. Now, obviously, this is going to have to be some, like, kind of high-tech robo boot for this to make even any sense. I think I accidentally Googled the same name as the Super Metroid item, which is interesting. Ideally, something with some kind of, like, hydraulics in it would be cool. I might just have to make this design from scratch. I'll use, like, a boot for some kind of like base, but I'm not really seeing what I'm kind of thinking about as a good reference. Really, I guess thinking about it now, you could realistically take the portal boots, like one of these boys, and just say like, oh, yep, it's a Valve reference item, just add it right in there. The problem is, number one, I don't want to do that because while I am extremely lazy, I don't want to make the impression that I'm extremely lazy, so I'm going to invent my own thing. But number two, I think, like, this is already a design, so while this is a good candidate, I don't have to do any of the work here. I want it to be, like, my own design for these. Actually, crap, I just said I wasn't going to use a Valve IP, but I completely forgot that they added this in Danger Zone for CSGO, which is literally exactly what I was thinking of, so yeah, we might have to be taking some inspiration from this. And chances are, this looks like a good enough blue team color. We'll shift this a little bit, but chances are these would have to be team colored for it to make any sense on the class. So we'll just draw the blue version, and then you can imagine yourself what the red version would look like. I have to draw the blue version because it's in my namesake, but hopefully you can understand. Hopefully this doesn't get me freaking canceled on Twitter. So my original thought for these is that there would be like a platform almost that you would be able to like rest your foot on, like here. There would be some kind of like ankle brace up here, and then there would be some kind of like hydraulic boy coming off the back like this. We'll see how feasible that looks, but I think some kind of design like that would be the most ideal. Obviously, we'll make it look better than this freaking, like, steamboat here, but there are options I think we can kind of work with. So I think the sole of the boot shouldn't look too far off from the gunboats. Maybe, like, some kind of dull metallic color, I think would be pretty interesting. The nice thing here, if you've seen the videos that I made about this topic before, you know that I've mentioned that TF2 likes to do this thing where you freaking have, like, rusted stuff. Engineer, luckily, doesn't have to follow that treatment, because Engineer keeps all of his equipment, like, high-tech and up-to-date. So my thought with this is that we should be pretty good to just, like, design something new-ish looking. All right, so let's draw the, like, back of the foot. I feel like that's gonna, like, come down a little bit this way. This is going to be the heel, like, where it sits. I've decided to make that its own section, and we'll actually make all of these in the team-colored metallic because I don't know, you gotta, like, you can't conceal too much of the model. If you're looking at the engineer's feet, I mean, you have your own problems to work out, and I'm not gonna judge you, but if you are, you should be able to tell what team he's on. I think this is a pretty good base shape. Let's clean this up a little bit. Yeah, something like this, I think is a nice, thing to work with. You can see how a foot would fit into there. And this is supposed to be something that goes on the outside of Engineer's boot. It's not an augmentation that, like, fits right around his foot, so with that in mind, I'm gonna design it accordingly. But yeah, something like this I think would work well. And one thing that I actually do think would be interesting now to think about it is if we had some kind of, like, thruster type of thing on the outside, so like something like that on the bottom of the shoe, so it actually looks like it would be blasting off, not just something that like goes on the ground and looks kind of high-tech looking. And we can add some like cross beams here to make it look like these are actually connected. I think just having one whatever's not super convincing of what I want it to look like. But yeah, I'm liking how this is coming along. It's occurred to me too that I've not done like one of these videos in so long that my art skills have like degraded to such a level where I'm like back at the freaking spy video, or like even the sniper video. I'm getting there. It's going downhill. And although this isn't very good, the idea is that the boots would connect where these little rings are. I should probably make them actually centered with the rest of everything. Okay, now we just have to add the pistons that I was trying to figure out what to do earlier, and then I'll add some detail. I think what the pistons would end up looking like, let's make them like this color, I don't know. They would basically just be like a massive cylinder like behind everything, and then there would be like another little thing that would attach to it. I think those would give it more of a feel of like this is something that has some working parts versus just being fancy shoes. And in terms of what I was going for, I think something like this would be pretty ideal. This isn't like exactly what I was thinking, but in terms of how much time and effort I'm willing to put into something like this, I think it's about accurate. And after some detailing, I think this is about as good as we're gonna get this. It's not perfect. There are still some things I would like to do if I had more time, but I'm trying to keep these designs, I guess, relatively simple. I'm not gonna friggin' recreate the Mona Lisa every single time I go into one of these. Generally, I think the only thing that I would have to mention is that this is supposed to be an arrow. If you looked at this, it would be like a little jump symbol, so that would be kind of neat. I think this turned out pretty well, though. It gets the point of what it does across. It's a little weird on the perspective, but I need to make sure that people understand what it does versus making it look pretty. Also, this is one of the first classes I've done one of these videos for that's actually American, so I don't have to do a ton of research on what to name these. I don't have to go to Google Translate and try to make some weird portmanteau out of foreign words. We can just go for it. Now, there are two directions that I could take with the name for this, right? I want to, like, make some joke about the space program because I think it's pretty topically relevant in Team Fortress 2. My original thought, right, was, like, the Texas space program, but then I realized literally one of the things that's, like, a commonly known phrase with, like, American space travel is Houston, we have a problem. So what if we call this Houston's solution? Something like this I think would work pretty well. I'll call it the Houston solution, so it's like not weird. My art skills have noticeably degraded. I think this didn't turn out too badly though, especially for a concept for an engineer secondary. I think the stats are the real winner of this weapon lottery here. I would love to see something like this in the game. I think it would be a lot of fun to give engineer a mobility option that would actually be like fairly balanced, but would allow him to get a lot of places without having to do these like crazy Wrangler jumps. Because, okay, Wrangler jumps are fun. I like the concept of being able to do that. The problem is they're really hard, number one, and number two, you need a lot of setup. You need like a level 3 sentry, you need a dispenser in case you miss. There's a lot that can go wrong, and I think giving engineer more of like a stat-oriented solution that would allow for a little bit easier execution of that type of thing without the setup would be really fun. So here's the Houston solution in all of its glory. Okay, let's move on. All right, let's do number 2. Let's see what we can do. Let's do a primary for this one. We'll end with the wrench because I feel like that's going to be the hardest one to do. Shotgun's probably going to be a little bit easier on the brain because there's like generally more of a structured shape versus a wrench, which might get a little bit bonkers depending on what kind of stats we want. All right, so here's the unfortunate truth that I've realized scrolling through these. The stats that can generate for engineer primaries are not nearly as exciting as the stats that can generate for all of the other slots. So I have been able to, in kind of like looking through some of the various things that have generated, get a good feel for what can generate. And because of that, I'm going to kind of Frankenstein some of these together because I've been scrolling for almost 10 minutes and I've not found anything good that I would like really consider to be an exciting base design. So let me just do a quick edit. I should probably actually read the stats first. This is just something that heals you when you've not taken damage, so passive health regen, a slight damage increase, and then firing less bullets per shot, and it has a slightly slower firing speed if you miss for a short amount of time, which is interesting. Let me show you what I'm thinking, though, because my original design is less based on this and more based on everything else that I've seen generate so far. So here's what I'm thinking with the actual design of this weapon. I didn't take... Like I said, I didn't take a ton of inspiration from the base of what we had, but all of these stats are in the generator for the most part, except for the main gimmick. The idea behind this one, right, is that it would basically be a single-shot shotgun where you'd fire a slug instead of like a pellets that have spread. So it would kind of work like the revolver almost, except because it would only have one shot in the clip, it would like reload before any of the inaccuracies would be able to take place. But the main function of the weapon, despite being like that type of modified shotgun, would essentially be that when you hit an enemy with one of the slugs, they are tagged for 4 seconds, and then if they're tagged, the sentries have like better targeting. For instance, if there are like 3 people within sentry range, whoever you hit with the tag is going to be what the sentry aims for, assuming they're like within line of sight. We could modify this a little bit to say like sentries that are aiming at tagged enemies would have like increased range. I gave it mini crits against that one person because number one, it's only for a couple seconds, and the counter to that, I guess, would just be to like go behind a wall. If the engineer is like focused on tagging somebody, then he can't really repair his sentry. There's a decent amount of counterplay to it. I don't think mini crits would be too overwhelming, just because even though it is a bit of increased damage, it would be still pretty easy to work around. And ideally, right, the shotgun itself wouldn't deal as much damage as the normal shotgun, just because you'd be spending most of your time with this reloading. Ideally, it would deal maybe around the same DPS as like the rescue ranger or something. I'm not thinking more than like 60 damage with maximum ramp up per like pellet. So there are a lot of directions that you could take this. I feel like stats wise, we'd have to try a little bit to balance it. I don't think... I could very easily see it both being completely useless and completely overpowered, depending on how you tweak the numbers, but I think giving Engineer the ability to control what his sentry decides to target without him actually having to control the sentry himself via the Wrangler would be a pretty interesting opportunity. So there are a lot of different things that we could do with that. Let me know what you think of the stats. I might tweak them a little bit before we show the final thing, but let's go on to designs. So I'm going to take the Frontier Justice as a pretty good baseline to work with here. One of the things about the Frontier Justice that I find particularly interesting is that it has this like weird receiver thing on top, and I think the concept of like a pretty traditional shotgun with some random bits and pieces, like high-tech whatevers, like welded onto the side is a pretty good design choice and fits Engineer pretty well. As for the shotguns that we're gonna use, well, I found a couple interesting single-shot boyos. Ideally, because it would only hold and fire one... What is this, the ERA 12 gauge? Yeah, this looks about right. This looks like something that would be used by the Engineer. And I'm actually going to take this as the model. This looks pretty cool. There's like a little strap on it, which I think would work pretty well. It would kind of set the silhouette apart from everything else. So as for the shotgun itself, right, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a ton of deviation that I think is necessary for the base design. We'll draw the stock. I don't know. Oh my god, this is gonna be such a long gun. I might have to shorten this for the sake of keeping it within theme here. This seems like a good shape for the stock. Let's now do the barrel. I think we might need to size this down a little bit to make sure we can fit everything. This is going to end up being a really long gun. Again, just for stylistic purposes, I might draw it a little bit shorter than I think is intended with these type of guns, but whatever. And we're actually going to cheat with the barrel and use a rectangle tool, because I feel like any type of straight line that I would try to draw, I like to keep, okay, I'll answer this question now. In the past, I've had a couple people ask, like, you know, why don't I just use straight line tools for all the straight lines? And my answer to that every time is, if I use straight line tools for all the straight lines, it would be very obvious that, like, there's a difference between the things that are the lines and the things that are drawn by hand. The problem is, in this instance, because this is a pretty long shape, any inaccuracies that I'm going to have just drawing this by hand are going to be kind of amplified versus, like, on the stock, which is a little bit more of a natural shape. So I don't want to, like, make it too messy, but I don't want to also make it so it's, like, weirdly, I guess, like, mismatched in terms of how the shapes are drawn. So there's my explanation for that, if anybody was confused. And for all intents and purposes, I think that's a pretty good grip. I like the style of wooden grips that are on most of these, although it is going to be a bit of a challenge. Is there another gun? Let me check. Okay, yeah, the Frontier Justice also kind of has a wooden pump, although that's more of a pump. This is more of just a grip, so I guess there's a little bit of a difference visually. I don't want this to look too much like the Frontier Justice is, I guess, what I'm worried about right now. And actually what I'm thinking is just because of, like, how this would look on the Engineer, having this be a little bit chunkier, because I was kind of worried about not getting the proportions right, but I think not getting proportions exact is actually going to help this weapon out a little bit, because, like, right now, if this was held like this as it is on the Engineer, this would stick out really far. So I think shortening the stock is going to be the way to go. Okay, as far as the base shotgun goes, I think this turned out pretty well. Let me fix up this a little bit, because this right now looks like one of those freaking, I don't know, it looks like someone tried to draw, like, a pear from memory. I just don't like it very much. Now we need to think about what exactly the Engineer would use to get the sentry to target people if he hits them. I think my thought is, like, some kind of laser sight toward the end of the barrel. I think that would be pretty appropriate, although, okay, yeah, that would look different enough from the Frontier Justice, I think. Yeah, having something like this makes it look a little bit more high-tech. We can add a little laser diode. I'm not a laserologist. I don't know, like, what the frick is actually on a laser, but it's something like this, right? That looks almost correct. And this is cool and all. I just don't know if this is high-tech enough for what something that Engineer would probably have. I think it would be interesting, too, if we could somehow incorporate an aspect of this gun to show whether or not you currently have the mark placed. So maybe, like, a light that lights up, like, on the back or something would be pretty neat. Maybe, like, an antenna on the side or something like that, and then we could have a blinking light that would turn on when you have the mark placed, maybe? Or maybe not blinking, that might be a little bit too distracting. I'm actually gonna cheat with the lights on this. I just remembered, because we're in Photoshop, we actually have access to some very interesting tools that are kind of cheating because I'm not drawing it myself. But it does work. Yeah, so now you can tell that this is a light. That makes it a little bit more obvious what it's supposed to be. In the same vein, we can draw the laser coming off of the thingy like this too. And yeah, the laser can turn on when you have the mark placed. That would also be an indicator. I was debating about whether or not to add, like, a sight or something, but that might just make it a little bit too overbearing. We probably could do something on top to make it a little bit more interesting, but I'm kind of happy with where it's at right now, just basic design-wise. Now we just gotta add the last little bit of detailing, and I think this one will be good to go. And yeah, I think this is a pretty good final design for this. I took a little bit of liberties on what exactly would be wired and not. There should probably be, like, a power source for this, but it's the freaking Engineer. I don't know. Maybe this is the power source. Who knows? In terms of, like, how this weapon looks, I think this does look exactly how you'd expect it to function, which is something that's pretty important. If I had more time, like anything else that I do on this channel, if I had more time, I'd probably fix it up a little bit more, but this would be pretty good, and I think you can kind of understand what I'm going for this concept. All right, we got to add the leather strap. I said I was going to do that at the beginning. Let's just do that really quick then. And there we go. Something like this, I think, both works silhouette-wise, it works function-wise. Okay, let's name this now. I have no idea what the frick I'm going to do for this, actually. I just thought of something that could be genius. Apparently, one of the synonyms for, like, radar is lodestar, which is, according to dictionary.com, I don't know how accurate this is, basically something that serves as a guide or on which the attention is fixed. So what we could call this is the Lone Star Lodestar. It sounds a little bit of a mouthful, but I think, honest to God, that this sounds like something that could be in TF2. So in terms of functionality, I think something like this would be really cool in TF2. I mentioned earlier about, like, basically if Engineer had a weapon that was, like, just a single-shot thing that you could use to control who exactly your sentry would be targeting. Something like that would be pretty neat. I know Engineer has, like, the Wrangler and stuff, but if you are able to make your sentry deal a lot of extra damage to one particular person, you would also be able to repair it in the process. Not to mention having a single shot thing for the Engineer, assuming this did like 60-ish damage, maybe similar to the revolver. I think, would having this be a 2-shot BOP at close range? No, I guess because the shotgun already does that, so, and this has to reload after every shot, so having this be like a 2-shot meat shot, or I guess point blank would be, because you're not like meat shotting anybody, but having this be 2-shot maximum ramp up would work out in its favor pretty well, and I think a lot of people would want to use something like this. Also, it did occur to me that I'm not entirely sure how this should work with spies. I think the best solution that I can give is if an Engineer hits a spy who's disguised, then the sentry will target it, and then if the Engineer hits a spy who's cloaked, nothing will happen, so that way you can't just randomly fire and get lucky. But if you hit a spy who's uncloaked and then he cloaks, then the sentry will continue targeting him after he's cloaked. Because that's kind of how it works. If a spy disguises within sentry range, it'll continue to shoot him. So I think that's probably the fairest way that you can handle that. So let me know if you change anything stat-wise. I'd be curious to hear how you guys would balance this. I guess also let me know if you would change anything design-wise, but I think what I've come up with is about perfect for the weapon, although I'd love to hear any kind of feedback or criticism you could think of. All right, now we're on to wrenches. The wrenches might get a little bit wacky because really anything I do with the wrench is probably going to affect buildings in some way or another, so with that in mind, I guess we have a little bit more freedom with what we want to come up with, but we also have to make sure that we balance it a little bit more because I can see that quickly getting out of hand. So I've been scrolling for quite a while, and the wrench selection in this generator, like I mentioned before, isn't amazing. There's only a couple interesting stats that I think we can work with. However, I was looking at this one, I went to get a drink, and I like came back and I looked at this one and I was like, it would be kind of interesting where instead of having this apply to the player, this applies to the buildings themselves. So having a wrench that makes it so the buildings can regenerate health but have like less total max HP, I think would be a really good, interesting concept that we could work with. Now, I can see this becoming a little bit overpowered, or useless, because, I mean, the Engineer still has to refill with, like, his buildings with ammo and stuff, so he can't just leave them unattended. But, actually, wait, I have a better idea with this one. Okay, so here's what I came up with for the new healing wrench. My thought was, at first, that this would be a wrench that would just let the buildings regenerate health themselves. But then I was thinking, we actually don't have any kind of, like, wrench or really anything that modifies the dispenser in any way. So I was thinking something that you could be able to use on, like, offense or something as Engineer to heal teammates who come into a range to kind of be an alternative to medic would be kind of interesting. Essentially, how this would work is that the dispenser can't give you metal or ammo if you're using this weapon, but the meter that would normally generate metal generates overheal reserves, and if teammates are standing near the dispenser, the overheal meter will drain, and then it will overheal the teammates based on whatever. Now, to balance this, we'd have to make it so the meter would either drain super quickly, or I guess the conversion rate would be pretty low, so the full meter would only give full overheal to, like, 2 teammates or whatever, or we make it so it actually grants the overheal, like, pretty slowly, like maybe vaccinator levels. And then the other things that I added were 25% faster dispenser healing rate to make it the same as a medigun, while you're in combat at least, and then plus 100% larger dispenser range just so you don't have to, like, crowd so close to it. And then the counter to that would be minus 35% building health on wearer, which roughly makes it so level 3 buildings have the same health as a level 1. It's like, it's pretty close. That's kind of what I wanted to go for. And you know, the more I think about it, I'm kind of realizing, right, that none of the stats on this wrench would necessarily conflict with the gunslinger. So this could very well be a PDA, because none of these stats actually affect, like, the wrench itself. Yeah, I generated a wrench here, but I kind of want to make this a PDA. We've gotten so far off from the original concept, but honest to God, it's a creative video. It doesn't matter. Oh yeah, and coincidentally, what that would also mean if you use this with the gunslinger is that minus 35% building health on minis makes it so they can be one-shot by a melee, which actually makes them significantly weaker. So yeah, I like this change. So my thought with the PDA itself, I think I am going to go the PDA direction with this, because I have a little bit more of an idea. If we made it themed around an oscilloscope, which for those of you who don't know is the thing that, like, shows you heart rates and a bunch of other things. If you've ever seen, like, a hospital, it's the thing that's, like, beeping in the background and showing the heart rate monitor. That type of thing, I think would be pretty close. Wow, I might have just accidentally solved the entire video right here. Okay, literally, this is, like, even the same shape as Engineer's PDA. All we'd have to do is, like, make it less deep, and I think this could be something that Engineer would hold in his hand. So somehow the universe has allowed me to be the laziest individual possible on this project, because not only do I not have to think about the design too much, I also can just use the rounded rectangle tool to make the body of the thing. Alright, cool. Now let's make the, I guess we can just use the circle tool for this too. Wow, man, this is like ultra low effort. If I do this one super quick, I might do another one too. We'll do like an actual wrench to see what we can come up with. And as it just so happens, all three of these that I've done so far have a pretty good excuse to be team colored. So let's go ahead and actually I don't have to manually do that. I can just set the fill of this. I think having the inside of like the main oscilloscope display be something along the lines of the Rescue Ranger, where it has like a heartbeat, be pretty cool, maybe based on the amount of metal you have left. Actually, yeah, all they'd really have to do is just copy and paste the Rescue Ranger display. Wow, this is probably the laziest weapon I've ever done, but it's gonna turn out well enough that, honestly, I think I can justify doing it this lazily. And before somebody says it, yes, I know this isn't exactly what oscilloscopes do, but they can be used for this, okay? They have the capability to be used as heart rate monitors. They just typically, like, there's a little bit of a different machine that's used for that, oftentimes. I think in Engineer's case, though, it makes sense, because, I mean, like, he probably does work with oscilloscopes on a regular basis. He's definitely more of a STEM, I guess biology is still STEM. He's more of an engineering guy than a medical guy, so having it be like a weird modified oscilloscope I think makes the most sense in terms of game design. And I'll hand draw the rest of this. I'll do the basic frame as shapes, but I think the hand-drawn feel that you can give this is something that you can't necessarily replicate. And actually what I think would be kind of cool is if we had this knob like correspond to something that you can build. So like if we have here, let's add the like main thing on the knob here, like this thing, the handle, I guess. What do you call this? I don't know knob terminology. That was perhaps poor phrasing, but you know what I mean. So like, yeah, this is the knob. You can see what's going on here. I'll call it the dial, because I know there's gonna be like some British 13-year-old out there who's like, he said knob on the internet. I don't have a license to laugh at that one. So anyway, we have like, here, let me pull up the freaking sentry icon, because I have no idea what the frick. Yeah, this right here is what I'm gonna draw, or at least attempt. And I'll just make like crappy versions of these, because I think you'll get the point of what I'm trying to draw better if I don't try to overdo it. And even we can just do like pretty simplistic icons too. I think that also works. Like you can tell that this is supposed to be a sentry, right? This looks like a sentry icon enough. And on today's episode of how to draw a dispenser icon and not get 1,000 comments saying Amogus, I think this looks far enough away from an Among Us character that nobody's gonna say it, although now that I pointed it out, everybody's gonna say it, so I've kind of played myself. Okay, I think that looks pretty good for the sentry and the dispenser. I'm trying to do like pretty simplistic icons just because I can. Honestly, I'm spending way too much time on these, but it's cool. It's like a fun thing. I used the rounded rectangle tool for everything else. I might as well spend the time somewhere. So then there's the teleporter entrance, and let's make the teleporter exit. In the spirit of being lazy, I feel like we can just Yeah, that looks about right. And there we go. Now we have a cool little icon set that actually looks like Engineer would be able to use. The calculator... I think that, yeah, the calculator construction PDA, I'm pretty sure doesn't have these, but I think this is a little neat bit of detail that if anybody actually goes to the effort of modeling these would add a little bit of character to it. So let's just like rotate this so it's actually on something so we can see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So now we should probably add a little bit more detail. Honestly, there were a couple more things that I was thinking of adding, but in terms of, like, the main structure of everything, this gets the job done. I don't really think we need anything else. This is something that's going to be covered by a menu most of the time that you have it out anyway, so having something that generally gets the gist across is probably going to be the most important thing. So let me just add a little bit more detail, and I think we'll be good. And I think for the base of everything, this is a pretty good design. I didn't do a ton of detailing. I just added like screws around the side and a button and a switch, because looking at the oscilloscope model that I have on my second monitor, it has those kind of. So I mean, yeah, it's a good detail. Like maybe this is power and this is build. I don't know. There's infinite possibilities. So for the name for this one, I kind of want to do something based around the fact that Engineer has a bunch of degrees, but not a medical degree. The problem is I think that would be a little bit hard to do and not get it sounding like something that Medic would have. Like, the unlicensed doctor, for instance. That sounds cool, but it's like, oh no, that's just Medic. That's not an engineer thing at all. Too bad the Southern Hospitality is already a thing too, because that would be a really good name for one of these things, but I think we can be creative enough. I just realized that a name that I could use for this is the Not Dying Machine, because Engineer has quite literally invented the not dying machine. I don't know if I want to go that route though. That would be really funny. Oh wait, I forgot about my secret weapon. Is called Let the Community Do It For Me. So here's the name that I'm gonna put on here. Is kind of a jab at the people who are using this, but it's just whatever. We're gonna call this the Remedial Support. Because quite frankly, this takes a whole lot less skill than using Medic, because you just put it down here. So this is literally just like Medic on easy mode. So it is kind of a jab. It might turn some people off from using this, but I think it's kind of funny. This is a terrible name, as always. I do this every single time that I do these videos. If you have a suggestion for this thing in particular, feel free to leave in the comments. It goes for all of the names that I've come up with. I don't think that any of the names that I've made in this video were perfect. I think the other two were pretty good, but this one's just whatever. So let me know what you think this should be called, and yeah, we'll leave it there. So here is the Remedial Support, real name TBA, and all of its stats and/or glory. I think this one's pretty cool. I think this definitely would be a little bit powerful depending on how you tweaked the numbers of the overheal system. An engineer option that focuses mostly on healing and like direct team support versus defense, I think would be really cool. I know engineer's not technically a support class, but he really should be. Dispensers are definitely underutilized, and having something that allows people to both play engineer, obviously at a little bit of a decreased capacity because your sentry doesn't last as long, but you actually have like attacking capabilities now in exchange for Uber, but you can now heal, and you can be a little bit more of a team player than you normally would be able to be. So we'll see. I think the stats on this one, oh yeah, the other thing too is spies would also be able to like come up and steal all of your overheal, so you'd kind of have to be like guarding it. You couldn't just leave it there and have it be like just a free overheal machine, because if a spy got to it, the spy could just steal all of the overheal, and you'd have to fight a like 185 HP spy, which would be kind of annoying. So there would be a little bit of maintenance required with this. I think it would be a cool concept if nothing else, but I would love to hear everybody's like stat suggestions or tweaks for not just this one, but all of them. I'm curious to see, because these have been a little bit wacky. We get wacky in these videos. So thank you for watching. If you would like me to continue this series, let me know. It's been like 6 months since I've done one of these, but I honest to God forgot how fun they were, because yeah, I had a blast doing this one. So yeah, if you want to see another one of these, feel free to let me know. Suggest any improvements for the weapons that I made or the series as a whole, and most importantly, have a good one.